but do you know Christ? How well do you know Him? Do you understand who He was? Do you know Him like a brother knows a brother, or like a mother knows her daughter, or as a husband knows his wife? And we talked about, for this to be true, you have to have this idea of a shared life. And the reason that this came really hitting home for me is because my wife is pregnant right now. If you haven't noticed, she's a little rounder in the front, and we're happy about that. And it won't be long until our son will be in this world. Like, really won't be long. It's really getting a little intense and scary right now. I think we're ready, but the birthing class we took this weekend really made me feel like maybe we're not so ready. But it's a great thing, but it really brings to mind this idea of a life being shared. Because Kirsten is currently literally sharing her life with another being, another person.
That's awesome.
It changes what she does, it changes what she thinks, it changes how she acts, where she goes. All these things about her life are changed because of the life that is in her. And in the same way, we need to know Christ so that He is a part of us. He is in us. He's someone that we have a close relationship with, and that begins to affect what we do. The things that you do don't affect Christ. It's the other way around. Christ in you affects the things that you do. And that's what we want to get at. That's the whole idea between this, or about this series here. And the big question came down to this. How well do you really know Jesus? What do you know about His life? How close is your relationship? And probably the most important question of all, if Jesus Christ were to come back tomorrow, would you recognize Him? Would you know Him well enough that just by seeing Him you would know, that's my Jesus, because we're close. We know each other. That's what we're trying to get about. So tonight I want to shift your thinking, and I don't want you to think about Jesus as this distant person, this wise man from way back when. I want you to think of Him as a person that lived, a real, living person. So instead of focusing on His death and resurrection, I want to focus a little bit on Jesus' life and really begin to think about this. Because if we want to relate to Jesus, if we want to have this relationship with Him, then there's got to be, like we talked about in our breakout groups, there's got to be some kind of commonality. We have to have something in common, something that we relate to Him about, right? We have to have an understanding about what His personality is, what His character is. So let's think about that for a second. Thinking of Jesus in His life. We just got done with Christmas stuff, and we talked about all the big nativity scene stuff, all the stuff that came together for Christ to be born, and how there were prophecies and people coming from faraway nations to come and pay Him honor. And He was a baby, and that was great. He's the Son of God, and that's super. But think about this. What was it like when He turned 8? What was it like when He turned 11 or 12? When He was a normal kid? What do you think that must have been like? Do you think it's easy to live as someone who had prophecies about them? What if you were born and you found out that everybody had been saying that you were going to be the Savior of the world? What kind of pressure is that?
A lot.
How do you live under that? That's a huge expectation. And do you think, honestly, that people treated Him great because of what's been said about Him? Oh, I doubt it. Because whenever we hear about somebody that's supposed to have this great talent, our first reaction is to try to prove that wrong. Right? Especially like, I admit, I used to have a thing against Taylor Swift because I felt like everybody's pumping her up as this huge talent, and I felt like she's just some dumb girl that had somebody write the songs for her, and she doesn't even sing that well. And I immediately began to tear down because she had this reputation of being this great musician, and I wanted to prove that wrong, but I admit, and I'm not a country music fan, but I admit, Taylor Swift, did I say Smith the first time? Okay, good. Taylor Smith won me over a long time ago, but Taylor Swift won me over recently because she really is good. She really does have this talent. She really does do these things well. But my first reaction was to break that down. So think about Jesus in His life, living up to the expectation of these prophecies that were about Him. That's some pretty intense stuff. That's not an easy way to live. I got a problem with Superman, and John used a little bit of an example of Superman this morning. You guys know who Superman is, right? One of the most well-known superheroes of all time. I've always had a problem with it because I feel like he's just got too much going on. Because it's like, let's think of superpowers. Let's make a hero. He's super strong. I'm like, all right, that's a good superpower. He's indestructible. All right, super. He can also fly. Okay, that's a lot of powers for one dude. Oh yeah, and he can shoot lasers out of his eyes. I'm like, okay, now we're getting a little heavy here. He can't do everything, right? You're like, oh no, not just that, but he can blow super cold breath out of his mouth. And I'm like, come on. He's indestructible. He's super strong. He can fly at the speed of time, and he can shoot lasers out of his eyes, and he can also cool down his beverage with a breath. That is too much for a guy. He is too indestructible. That's the thing that I don't like about him. He is not vulnerable enough. The superheroes I like are the superheroes that have weaknesses that they have to overcome. And what I want you to get past tonight is I don't want you to think of Jesus as this Superman character that because he was the Son of God, he had an easy ticket through life. That's not how it went for him. Even though he was the Son of God, he was still a person with still the weaknesses that we have, the vulnerabilities that we have, the hurt that we have. And that's important stuff. So you think about Jesus again as a teenager. He is not Superman. He's facing the rejection of his friends because nobody wants to be friends with the guy who's supposed to be the Son of God. I mean, you can't even have a friendship with that, right? So then he grows up a little bit, becomes an adult. He starts walking around the country, spreading his word and giving messages to people and doing that kind of important stuff. And we read a lot in the Bible about how people heard his word or were healed by him and got really excited about being around him. They wanted to be near him and all this stuff. But what about all the people that didn't? I would be willing to bet that for every one person that followed Christ, there were 100 people that said, whatever, you're not the real deal. 100 rejections for every one acceptance. I can almost guarantee it because that's the way our world works. In fact, one time he went to a town and he spoke about God and he said something about being the Son of God, and this is the reaction the people had. They chased him out of the town to the nearest hill that had a cliff, and they were going to push him off it. That's some pretty serious rejection. They chased him to push him off a cliff, but fortunately, he is Jesus, and he is miraculously able to walk back through the crowd, go his own way without being hurt because of that. He's vulnerable like we are, hurts the same way we do, but he's not going to take that kind of business from people. He can walk straight through them and say, once again, I'll show you I am the Son of God. I just want to make that clear. But people were rejecting him. People were hurting him. And then, even more than that, as his ministry grew, Pharisees, these people that were big religious leaders, these people that were supposed to love God, they didn't just hate him. They made this elaborate plot to kill him. They said, we reject this guy so much and hate him so much. Let's get him arrested. Let's send him to prison. Let's put him on a cross and kill him. And if that wasn't rejection enough, then one of his 12 closest friends betrays him to these people that are trying to kill him. Judas accepts the bribe from these guys and turns in Jesus for all this stuff. And how do you think that made Jesus feel? Even though he knew it was coming, even though he had this great vision of what his life was going to be like, that's great. But does it ever feel good to have a friend turn on you? To stab you in the back like that? I don't think so. And after he died, one of his very closest friends, Peter, even denies that he ever knew Jesus 3 times. It would be like you walking into a place with your mother and father, and then they pretend not to know you. And you're like, all right, guys, seriously, no. We know each other. That's my parents. And they keep doing it 3 times in a row, denying that they even know who you are. And even though that'd be kind of a goofy situation, there's a part of us that hurts. His best friend denied him 3 times. And in perhaps the darkest moment in human history, when Jesus is on the cross, his Father, God, even has to turn his face away from him. Because he is carrying the sins of the world, he faces the roughest rejection possible. His Creator, his Father, the person he prayed to and trusted and communicated with, cannot be around him because he is covered in our sin. And for that moment, God has to turn away and say, I reject you. Now, that's a serious heart rejection that Jesus had to feel.